This episode is brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform that makes it fast and easy to create your own professional website, portfolio, and online store. For a free trial and 10% off, visit squarespace.com/iMore and enter offer code iMore at checkout. A better web starts with your website. It is May 22nd, 2014. I'm Rene Ritchie, and right now we're going to talk about WWDC 2014, what we may or may not see there, Angela Ahrendts and the new face of Apple Online and Retail, iMessage, and all the week's news. This is the iMore Show. Today on the show, we are joined by Jim Dalrymple, Editor-in-Chief of The Loop. How are you doing, Jim?
I'm doing good, Rene. How are you?
Tim Hortons app, Jim. We can now use our iPhones to get coffee, donuts, and other snacks.
I know. It's like, Canada's come out of the third world or something.
It's a Canadian miracle. We no longer are subject to those jerks from Seattle and their Starburst coffee.
Yeah, so I haven't actually used the Tim Hortons app yet, but when I go down to California, I use the Starbucks app all the time. I have it in my passbook. And the first time I did it, I felt kind of like I was stealing or something, I mean, you drive up to the window, grab the coffee, and they swipe that thing on your phone, and I drive off, and I felt like, ooh.
It's interesting because, Passbook was introduced a couple of years ago, and it's one of those things where even people at Inside Apple will admit that they're sort of beholden to other companies to implement it. Right. And they do it like Starbucks does a fantastic job. Some of the airlines, not so much. So I'd really like to see better apps in Passbook.
Well, if you did the invite for the Beard Bash yesterday,
I did.
Saw that there was a Passbook piece to that as well. When you get the the response for your RSVP, there's a link in there to add it to Passbook.
I did that. It was phenomenal. I now have a large stylized image of your beard in my Passbook.
It's the way things should be.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's interesting now is because we have the Passbook app and we have great apps like Starbucks, but also in the Apple Store app, you can scan a barcode and pay, and that's where I really feel like stealing, Jim. I walk into an Apple Store, I scan something, I walk out, I look to make sure no one's going to tackle me.
Yeah, I know. It's weird, isn't it? But, the way that they put this stuff together is so good, and it's kind of like doing something to stop the few percentage of people that are going to steal, or do you make it really easy for the people that are honest and just want a nice experience? And I think that's kind of the approach that Apple took with everything that they're doing with retail and mobile payments and things like that. When I walk into an Apple store, I feel like there's always somebody there that's ready to help me. But they're not there to pester me.
Yes.
And I can pay quickly and walk out. I don't have to line up to talk to somebody about what I need. And then after I'm done with that person who's probably exasperated by that time because there was a line of people to talk to him, then I don't have to go line up at a cash register and behind all of the same people that I just was lined up with to talk to the guy in the first place, I walk up, there's somebody there, and whoever it is knows that what I'm talking about. I need an adapter to go from FireWire to Thunderbolt. Oh, well, that's right over here. Come on over. And they walk you right over, they grab it and say, here it is. Do you need anything else? Well, no, actually, that's all I need. Boom. Out comes the thing. You're gone. I'm out the door. But there's no pressure. There's no nothing. It's just you've walked into stores where you say, yeah, I need this adapter. Oh, that's over in that department. You got to go talk to that guy over there.
If there's a guy to ask, even.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I've walked into big box supply stores and there's been nobody there. Like the funny thing about the Apple stores, they have more staff than many stores have customers.
No, it's true. Even my Speedo store, where I pick up my tailor-made Speedos, they don't have
No, but I mean, like that, it solves a problem because as many people who are on staff at an Apple store as there are, there's still times when they're all busy because there's such a popular store, and then I can just walk in because I happen to have used Apple products for a long time. I know the adapter I need. I know where it is. I can just go grab it, scan it, and walk out. None of my time was wasted. None of their time was wasted, which means they have more time to spend with people who need extra help, and it's almost as close to a win-win as you can get.
Yeah, yeah, it really is, and it makes you feel good when you walk in. You It's easy to find the thing that you're looking for. I mean, the stores are very well laid out, and you walk in, you find the thing very easily, and you're gone again. And that's the way that things should be,
And
really.
there's no maze at the end where they're trying to make you walk through all these corridors with impulse buy stuff laying out at the end just to get out of the store.
Right. And it's not that the stores are Spartan, because they're not. There are a lot of products in there. But the stores are just very well laid out so that it makes it appear that there's a lot of room, and there is a lot of room, to for people to go around, and you can have 2, 3, 4 people standing around a computer and still have people beside you on an iPad, doing what they're doing. So there's just lots of room to be able to do things, and I enjoy that myself.
And of course, Angela Ahrendts started at Apple about 3 weeks ago. There's already rumors. Well, beyond the rumors, she was given both Apple Retail and Apple Online, which is unprecedented. And as much as they were both great experiences, they weren't always a homogeneous experience. And the idea that I can order something online, bring it back to the store, there's a lot of areas where, and her talents, of course, with the Asian retail, there's a lot of areas where it sounds like she can make things even better.
Yeah, and I think that's Browett, when he came in, the last guy that Tim Cook hired to do um, retail, he was a moron. He went in and was that too subtle?
No, he cared about numbers, not people, which is entirely not an Apple philosophy.
He went in and the changes that he wanted to make was to reduce hours, to try and gyp the retail employees. I mean, if you're supposed to get, a break, or you're supposed to get extra pay if you work, then cut it back, just so that they don't. Silly, silly things that was not in the Apple culture at all. And from what I read, it was Mark Gurman, right?
Mm-hmm.
That had that information the other day that we're talking about. And Mark had the story was great because it showed that she was really focused on what we expect Apple to be focused on. And as I read that section of here are the changes that she plans to make, China, okay, that has to be done. Mobile payments, and the experience. The experience is already great, but as you said, there are probably ways to make the experience better. So let's figure out how to do that. And that's the kind of stuff that Apple wants. That's the kind of stuff that Apple should be focused on. And I was very pleased to see that, according to Mark anyway, that's what they're going to be doing.
Yeah, he's a savvy guy, Mark. But what I like is that her type of personality, just from what little I've read about her, is that she is swift in taking action. She cares deeply about customer experience. Like you said, the things that Apple cares about. So one of the things I'm wondering is if we'll get to hear from her, because you don't hear from a lot of Apple executives, but the ones you do hear from are very good at bringing that message. And just from listening to her say other things, I think she could be a really good part of Apple's front-facing executive team.
Well, I think that she will be, because retail is an important part of what Apple's doing. I mean, look at the keynotes for the last how many years. Start off with, here's what's happening at Apple Retail. Ron Johnson used to talk quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then, when they got Browett, they realized, oh, geez, we got to hide this guy. So, I think that she will come out and speak a bit more. Well, look at Lisa Jackson, the VP of Environment. She's coming out and speaking more. She just spoke at the Fortune thing. And, she was, the former, director of the EPA?
Yeah, Environmental Protection Association in the U.S.
Yeah. So she obviously knows what she's doing. And that's typical of Apple, too, to go out and get people that don't just have a flashy resume, but actually know what they're talking about. So I think that they're making a lot of the right moves right now, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I still, personally, I like the mystique of the Apple, under Steve,
Yeah.
where executives really didn't talk. You had Phil talking, you had Steve talking, but a lot of the other people you didn't really hear from unless there was a need. If something environmental happened, and here's who we have, former director of the EPA, and talk. Here you go. But there's a certain mystique there that once you open the kimono, then that mystique is gone.
Well, I think Apple is still fair compared to other companies. At least they're fairly deliberate, and they're also really polished. Like when you see Randy Ubilos come up and show off photo software, or you see any of their expert people doing an expert demo, it still comes across as very Apple.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about Randy. Xander Soren is
Mm-hmm.
another one when he does GarageBand for iOS or the Mac. I mean, Xander's very good at doing the music stuff. I mean, he's just everything is just so
You can tell they love it.
smooth. But the demos that Apple does. When Xander or Randy get up there and do those demos, you can actually go do those demos. And they will work just the same way that they did them. There's no, shortcuts that they have scripted or automated in there. I mean, stuff happens. So yeah, they're good at what they do. There's no doubt.
And to your point, at almost every Apple event, Tim Cook has come out, and I like the way Tim Cook is positioned recently. Steve Jobs would come out, and he was Steve Jobs, founder of Apple, as close to a modern legend as we have. Tim Cook is a logistics guy, best logistics guy in the world, but that's different. And he's not going to be Steve Jobs, but now he's earned the role of Apple's core values guy, and he is so good and so earnest in describing why Apple is doing what they're doing and what matters to them. And I really enjoy him as he's been discussing that on the different Apple events.
Yeah, and Tim doesn't do demos like Steve did. Tim holds himself and his place where I think we expect him to be, and that's to give us an overview of the company and an overview of where we are and where we're going. And then he let Phil Schiller introduce Mac Pro or some laptops, and that's great because Phil is great at doing that. I mean, he's just got such a great sense of humor, and he's very good at introducing them. We even saw Eddie Q, get up and do some things, and that's great too. It's good to see some of these people be able to stand up and show some personality. Eddie was Steve's Mr. Fix-It.
Mm-hmm.
Eddie's a very, very powerful man, and he's also a very nice guy. I've talked to Eddie on a number of occasions, and he's a lover of Apple and of the products that he makes, and you can't help but like him because he's a nice guy. He's good to talk to.
Yeah, I think that's really true, and I think it's nice how Tim Cook, even in Steve Jobs' era, he would come on stage sometimes, talk about the numbers, the stores, those kinds of things. But recently, with the our signature message, and he did the narration for the latest environmental video, and he's done some of the stuff that is talking about accessibility, and even at that stockholders meeting where people were complaining that Apple wastes money on accessibility, and he said basically get the hell out if that's what you think. And it doesn't come across as something he's chosen to do, but something he believes so deeply about.
Well, and that's Apple has always done things a little bit different than what other companies have, and maybe accessibility is it. And if you look at some of the stories early on that I had in the Loop magazine, I focused on accessibility and not me writing about what Apple has done through accessibility, but what people that needed these features wrote. And they wrote about how these Apple devices, whether it's the computer or the iPhone and the iPad, these devices changed their lives. I mean, it's not just
It's not
okay,
hyperbole.
to do one little thing, this is a life-changing event for people. And then when you hear people say, well, you're spending too much on, this, you, you just have to sit back and, I mean, I would have gladly picked that person up and thrown them out myself. But
Yeah,
if you're watching and you want me to, next time just ask.
Yeah, and what I find really cool about that, and I'm going to lead us a bit into WWDC, is that Apple released the WWDC app yesterday. And as you go through the list of things scheduled, it's not just the TBA, TBD, whatever of the past. There's, oh, this one's a whopper, can't tell you what this one is, oh, you'll be so surprised. There's like a level of fun and humor to everything that they're doing right now as well.
Yeah, well, I think, despite what Wall Street wants the public to think, Apple is doing very well right now. And I think that the employees and the executives are very positive about the future. And that in itself, one little thing about an app that they put out for WWDC should tell us a lot about the mindset behind where the engineers are coming from. And if the engineers are that happy, where they're just, poking fun and doing, imagine how happy the executives are. I mean, I believe that there is some good stuff coming. And, you and I have talked on the podcast before and privately about the fact that Wall Street expects Apple to come out with game-changing, innovative, revolutionary products every year. Mm-hmm. And nobody does that. It's just not possible to do for any company. Most companies have one, maybe if they're lucky, two game-changing products in the history of the company. Apple has had the iPhone, the iPod, the iPad, the Mac, not to mention the system software and everything that's built into that. They've had many, many game-changing products. And that's not something that you can have every year or every couple of years. And I think Apple was very lucky in a lot of ways, but to have the first iMac and then to have an iPod right after that, and then right after that an iPhone, and right after that an iPad, they kind of built everybody up to expect, oh, it's been 2 years. Wait, what's coming next? This big thing. But at some point, that has to slow down.
Yeah, I think that's really true, and I think that we're going into WWDC 2014 in a week and a half. Jim and I will both be in San Francisco, waiting anxiously for the keynote to start. It's hard to know exactly what's going to happen because Apple doesn't show their cards early, and they can change their minds very close to showtime. But I've heard nothing from people that I know and people who I know that know people who know things. They are so excited. And one of the things that I love is that they are so excited for OS X this year. And I know iOS got a lot of attention last year, got a redesign last year, got some much requested features like background refresh last year. This year, so much of that excitement looks like it's being pointed at OS 10.10. And as a Mac fan, I love that.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, I still use my Mac every single day, a lot. That's what I do most of my writing and posting and everything else on. So being a big Mac fan, it's important for me that Apple still shows that a lot of love. And despite Microsoft's focus, I don't think that we're out of the desktop laptop stage yet in our evolution. And for Apple to continue to focus on that, but continue to focus on a different way by integrating a lot of the technologies that make iOS so great and make the Mac OS so great, and integrating them into the cloud so that we're able to access our data. I remember years ago when I would switch over to a new computer, it would take hours because you would have to drag over your music, you would have to drag over your documents folder and your pictures and everything else. Now I just start up the new computer, type in my Apple ID, yeah, and things just start happening in the background. Stuff is downloading, things are syncing, all this stuff is going on. And yes, there's lots of conversations. Could it be better? Okay, I'll give you that. But as a consumer, it works very well. I start up a new iPhone, type in my Apple ID, Boom, everything I need is there, done. That's the way that things should work. And by Apple, even in the last couple of revs of OS 10, what they've done, with reminders and just little things, notes. I use notes now more than what I ever have before, ever in the history of notes. I use now because I know it's going to be everywhere that I am. It can't not be wherever I am. So I love that.
I'm going to take a quick break and tell you about our first sponsor today, and that is MailRoute. Now, if you're not familiar with MailRoute, they are a service that does one thing and does it very, very well. They stop spam dead. If you imagine your email box as this pristine, as this perfect, as this clean place where it's just the stuff that matters to you, and then you imagine the internet, this place that can be festooned with creepy malware and spam and all sorts of horrible things that you don't want anywhere near your computer, well, MailRoute sits in between the two like a knight, like a superhero, and it stops all of that horrible stuff from getting to your mail account. It's the leading cloud service provider for email protection. They know what they're doing. There's no software to install, no hardware to maintain. It is a service. All you do is sign up for it, direct your mail through MailRoute, comes right back to you crystal clean, spam-free. It's an easy to maintain. You've got an interface that lets you do, blacklist if you want to get rid of specific people, whitelist if you want to make sure a certain person or company is never caught in the spam trap. They even have an API if you want to do your own account management. It's LDAP and Active Directory, TLS, mailbagging, outbound relay. If you are technical, it's got all that technical stuff for you. If you're not, all you need to know is turn it on, no more spam. To remove spam from your life for good, just go to mailroute.net/iMore. For a free trial, you get 10% off for the lifetime of your account. As someone who's got a lot of public-facing email addresses, who's one of those people that prove 95% of email on the net is spam, something like MailRoute is invaluable. It just keeps email clean. Thanks, MailRoute, for supporting the iMore show. Thanks, you guys, for supporting the show through MailRoute. Yeah, I think that's really true. It's the ubiquity, haha, that was a code name for iCloud, whatever. But I think that is really what made it work so well. I also think if Apple had their druthers, if they had unlimited resources, they would have tried to do this last year so that iOS and OS 10 all got the attention they deserved. But prior to this, and Peter's talked about this a lot too, Apple spent a lot of time and effort not to make iOS and OS 10 the same, but to make someone who knew the iPhone or the iPad feel really comfortable when they sat down at the Mac. And you wrote about this when Lion came out, Jim. They gave it the same names. So Address Book became Contacts and iCal became Calendar. And right now they're different again. They're still green felt in Game Center. And that seems like an obvious thing that Apple could have been working on for the last year.
Well, I think depending on your focus and what you're looking at, I think that the obvious things are different for everybody. I may not care. I may not have opened Game Center, so I don't even know that there's felt in there, because games aren't that important to me. But I may notice that it's very difficult for me to read Contacts because it's just so stark and so blind. So for me, the obvious thing is to fix Contacts because, that's obvious. It has to be fixed. And we're all in that same boat. That's why I enjoy the pieces that you guys post about, things that we want in iOS 8. That's great stuff. It's not, these wild new features all the time. Sometimes it's notifications. These need to change to make them better. And here's how we would suggest that we do that, and that kind of stuff is great because it opens up conversation and dialogue between users and us.
So my rationale for those things, and some people think that I'm being a dick by doing it that way. You're presumptuous because you're suggesting a solution. My thing is I don't like to point out a problem when I can't think of a solution because it seems cheap to me. Like it's easy to say Apple has to fix this because then you don't have to consider any of the ramifications. But when you start trying to think of, well, how could they fix it? Then you have to realize, well, no, because it would create this problem, or no, because it would stop this. And I think that makes the criticism more fair in a way.
I agree. Are there some things in iOS and OS 10 that need to be fixed? Absolutely. There's always going to be. As long as there's software, there's going to be things that need to be fixed. There's going to be power users that use it differently than what I may, and they're going to need more features and more ability. So that kind of stuff is easy to say Apple has to fix this. But when you start digging into existing features and how they could work better, you're right. I mean, it's pretty cheap, and a lot of people do take the digs. Hi Forbes. A lot of people do take the digs, you know, and they don't have anything really good to say. And that's I think where you guys are excelling at doing that. Maybe what you suggest is complete bull. Maybe it'll never work, you know. But at least there's something there that, okay, if you did this, then maybe it would be better. You know, an Apple engineer could easily call and say, hey, you know what? We tried, can't do that.
I've had that happen.
Yeah. Yeah, so have I.
Yeah, but I think at least it gets because it sometimes at least it just gets a discussion or a conversation started. And one of the reasons for that too is like with the iMessage thing that's going on. And yes, there are bugs, and Apple said they're fixing bugs. But a lot of people will say, well, I stopped using my iPhone. It should no longer intercept my messages. And I start thinking about that and I go, well, how does Apple know you stopped using iMessage? Did you tell it? No, I shouldn't have to tell it. Well, if you don't tell it, what do they do? Do they do a pop-up every day going, are you still using iMessage today? That's really annoying. Well, they should time it out faster. Well, okay, what if I have an iPhone and an iPad and I'm camping or something, I have a bad connection. Should all my iMessages get lost because I'm off contact for 3 days? What if I'm on a cruise ship for a week? What if I leave my iPhone, but I still have my iPad? It's a complex problem to solve.
And what if you're just on a plane for 7 hours? All my iMessages are gone? No, I mean, you know, it's easy to think that, okay, this should happen, but yeah, there are bigger things behind the scenes that are going on, and you know, when it works, we're happy. But when there's somebody's suing them about that, right?
Yeah, it's unbelievably, Jim, because iMessage is incredibly intrusive in the SMS pipeline. Like BlackBerry has BBM separate, Google's trying to merge Hangouts, but Apple did it so well that if all you have is an iPhone, you don't even notice the difference. One app, one experience. And the cost for making it incredibly good for hundreds of millions of people is if you do decide to leave the iPhone, you've got to make sure that you deregister yourself. I think that's a fair exchange.
Well, and you should get kicked in the ass if you decide to leave anyway because you're stupid. So
that's why I have you on the show, Jim, because you say the things I can't say. Yeah, but I think that's fair, and I think, like, you know, iMessage, there's a lot of things that I would wish. For example, security on iMessage. Some people say the security model is not as good in iMessage as it is in the rest of the iPhone. But as a user, I don't want to generate and manage my own security certificates like I would for PGP email. So I'm willing to trust Apple and let them broker the exchange to make my life easier, and I think that's also a good exchange.
Yes, and you know, there are all of these things that go on. This researcher noticed if a malformed, you know, whatever gets into this piece of code by, you know, that will only happen once every million years. And I look at it and think, you know, and we both know people that are smarter than us that, you know, can decode that kind of stuff. And they said basically that is never going to happen. You know, but the press is, oh, Apple's in trouble now because of this malformed whatever. So, you know, stuff's going to happen. There's going to be bugs. There's going to be things that happen. Now, this iMessage thing, as much as it's a bug and it doesn't matter to us because ours is working fine, it still has to be fixed. It shouldn't happen. So, you know, Apple needs to do it and fix it, and they are. They released a statement saying that they are fixing it. So go do it.
Well, that's the thing with security that I dislike a lot, is that security has become sensationalism. Like, there's a security thing. Whenever we see one, we're very fortunate. We have Nick Ahrendts, QA engineer to the stars, editing the security stuff for us. He goes in and tries to verify it, and then he hits it like a tornado to check all the different stuff that's happening there. But I think that's how I want to personally report it. And I remember the email attachment bug, security, whatever it was, a couple weeks ago. We looked at it and it said, well, this only happens if someone steals your phone and if you don't have a passcode on, or they brute force your passcode, or they jailbreak it, but there's no jailbreak for 7.1.1. So either it has to be an iPhone 4 basically that gets stolen with no passcode on it. Yeah. And the window, that's such a small amount of people compared to the outrageous headlines that were being generated.
And that's part of the problem. And I think that's why when I look at what people say on Twitter and in email, that's why people enjoy reading iMore and why they come to me, because trying not to make those headlines out of reach of what the story says. Although people did accuse me of that yesterday. They accused me of that with Google and Nest, where
Okay.
Google's going to put ads in Nest. And obviously, I think some people took my poke at Google a bit too seriously. Maybe the headline was wrong, but I left it because I thought it was right. Even Tony Fidel responded to the Loop account yesterday and said that he has no plans to do advertising. And I wrote back and said, Tony, I have a lot of respect for you for years. It's not you I'm worried about. Derek Smith, that's who I'm worried about. So do I think that Google would put ads in Nest if they could? Absolutely. I do. I believe that 100%.
Well, so I believe that too, and I don't think it's bad to say that because that's Google's business. It's like I think Apple would sell me a watch at 30% markup if they could because that's their business. And I understand that, I'm happy to pay with money. Some people have more time than money and they want to buy something that they can build themselves because it saves them money and they don't care if it takes a day or a week or whatever. And some people don't have time or money, but they don't care about their attention, so they'll watch an ad. They'll watch a ton of ads just to get a video for free. And some people will just give up their data. Like they believe convenience is more valuable, or they don't have time or money or attention to give, and they're fine with trading their data for that. And I think as long as a company is honest and not honest is the wrong word, but it tells you what you get up front, then you can make an informed adult decision about it. My choice, I said this before, I bought a Panasonic TV. It tried to show me an ad. I turned it off. Yeah. I bought a Panasonic Blu-ray player. It tried to show me an ad. I couldn't turn it off. I returned it and got a Sony Blu-ray player. Because I would rather pay more than have to look at an ad on my Blu-ray player. And I like that we have those choices.
Well, and there's something else that we've talked about. People talk about their privacy and that they don't like the way that really things are going these days. But yet, if you offer a $10 off coupon for something, they'll just type in any information you want. Just give me my $10 coupon, and then they wonder why they get spam and why all this stuff happens. So I have mixed feelings about how that stuff goes on, how people feel about privacy, but what they actually do. There are extremes to that, and I think for the most part, a lot of us in the tech industry, not just writers but the listeners to this show even are kind of in the middle. We understand that stuff is happening. Stuff is tracking and stuff. It's there and it's happening, and for the most part we're okay. But I think when it starts to get creepy is when it starts to bother me. Like when Google says that it'll be able to show you things that you've searched for. What?
Well, I have a Nexus 5, sorry, and I can't use Google now because I refuse to turn on web search tracking and give it my personal Gmail account. I just give it my work Gmail. So Google Now is not working for me, but other people are fine with that. They love the idea of Google Now so much they'll turn on everything that Google wants.
Yeah, I find that kind of stuff a bit intrusive, and I understand why Google's doing it because they want to make more money, but I think a lot of us are at the point now, as consumers, a lot of us are at the point where we would rather buy something than be a product. Mm-hmm. And, there was a time when that really shifted. There was a time when we had to buy something. And then, a lot of the shareware, freeware services on the internet came around, and we were able to get a lot of stuff for free in exchange for information. And I think a lot of that is starting to kind of go away now, where we're saying, you know what, I'll pay $20 or $50, just leave me alone, and to know that when you go to Apple. And I'm not saying that Apple doesn't track your purchases and stuff. Of course, everybody does. But what I'm saying is you go in and buy an iPod, that's it. You bought an iPod. And if you check the box that, can we send you news, Apple will send you news. If you didn't, they won't. But that's the product. I'm not the product. And I think that's important.
My old joke on this, Jim, and I apologize if I told you this before, is when I go out with Apple, it feels like we both sit down at a table, we both pay for our dinners, we both leave. When I go out with Google and some other companies, it feels like we sit down, Google buys me a lobster dinner, and then when it's over, they sort of leer across the table expectantly at me.
That's good. That's kind of what it's like, isn't it?
So one of the things that's interesting, though, is I think it's a differentiator. Like if you could make an argument that I am more secure, I am privacy first, and I think Apple's security document was part of them making that argument. But I think like some people will say, why doesn't Siri do all the stuff that Google now does? And internally at Apple, they're like, we would have to take so much of your data. Like they do the next location thing, which is nice. But they would have to put so much of your personal data on their cloud and parse it and do stuff with it that they're not comfortable doing that. They don't want to have your data on their servers doing that. So the consequence of that is we don't get those features. And I'm fine with that, but I think the market sometimes thinks you can have everything.
Yeah, the market seems to think that you should have everything until you get everything. It was the market that said to Samsung, oh, you got to put out a smartwatch, put out a smartwatch. So Samsung put out a smartwatch, and what did the market say? Oh, this sucks. I mean, sometimes you don't need everything. And, one of Steve's, summarizing Steve Jobs, when he said, it's not always about saying yes, you have to know when to say no. And you end up saying no more than you say yes. So I think that that's really where we are. I mean, it's not just up to Apple to decide what technology we're ever going to use. Clearly, there are other companies that can release technology and features and stuff like that. But I think it comes down a lot to a matter of trust. Do we trust Apple with our credit card information? I've never had a second thought about Apple having my credit card. Google doesn't have my credit card because God knows what they're going to search for.
Google has my credit card. I have a Google Play account, and Amazon has my credit card.
Oh yeah. No, Amazon doesn't have mine. Yes, Amazon does have mine. Yes, I don't mind Amazon either, to be honest. I've never been one to kind of get the Kindle, but I think that's because maybe I'm more multitasking all the time than looking at a Kindle as reading a book. I know some people like it. I don't. I don't get it. But Amazon has a strong brand. They're very good at what they do, and they excel. I mean, there's no question about that. They excel at what they do. But no, I wouldn't give Google mine.
There's a couple questions in the chat room I want to get to. Nick wants to know, Jim, if you would enjoy having Siri on your Mac on OS X.
It's an interesting question. I don't know. I mean, most of the time that I use Siri, it's, if I'm in a car and I push the button and say, give me directions to, this address, or, find a restaurant or something around here. Yeah, okay, take me there. I don't really ask Siri anything that, Siri, I don't know, when was the last time, a Mac Pro was released or something. I don't know. I don't really ask it things or I don't think about asking it things like that.
Yeah, because to me there's distinct elements. There's Siri and there's dictation, and we've already gotten dictation on the Mac. And that, to me, if I just can't type something and I want to dictate it, that's a really important part, and we already have that. Me telling my Mac, find me directions or something, it's not as, like, it might be nice, and I think Nick in the chat room said, play me, the next episode of Amplified, and it will go and find Jim's podcast and play it. I wouldn't have to look for it. So, maybe that would be nice. But would it need a special microphone for that, like the iPhones have? How would Apple have to run the service? How would it have to protect the service because it's not an iOS security model? I don't know all the answers to that yet.
Yeah, and over the years, we've had so many promises of virtual assistants on the Mac that just never came to be. And I think that we were all a bit frustrated. I know I was, trying to get that stuff done. And I don't know. Siri is certainly a different beast because she's very good. And but it must be my mindset, maybe. I mean, maybe Nick is onto something here because, and I know that it's been talked about before, but I consider Siri to be kind of a mobile virtual assistant. You know, not just something that's on all of my devices. And I don't know if I would use it if it was on all my devices, if it was on my Mac.
We're going to take a quick break, and I'm just going to talk to you about one of our sponsors today. That is Squarespace, the all-in-one platform that makes it fast and easy to create your own professional website, portfolio, and online store. For a free trial and 10% off, visit squarespace.com/iMore and enter offer code iMore at checkout. A better web starts with your website. Now, I'm sure almost all of you have heard about Squarespace before. I'm going to tell you again because it is a fantastic service. I used to work as a web developer. I used to painstakingly assemble websites on a Mac Performa using the text editor and Fractal Painter, to date myself terribly. And it took a lot of time. I got really good at website coding, but it took forever to get a website online, and nobody else could help me with it. Nobody else could use it. There was no, content management systems. It wasn't a blog back then. Now you can just go to Squarespace, you can sign up, you don't have to give them a credit card or anything, just get a trial account. You can build your own website. It's simple, it's easy, they have templates, they're beautifully designed. Yes, you can do HTML, yes, you can do CSS if you really want to, but if you don't want to bother, if you don't know how to bother with that, you can just drag and drop your content. They have 24/7 support, live chat and email. Their plans start at just $8 a month. They include a domain name if you sign up for a year. It's responsive design, so it looks great on the iPhone, on the iPad, on the Mac, anywhere you want your site to be. Now, if you decide you do like Squarespace, you can keep that account. Just go to squarespace.com/iMore, enter offer code iMore, and you get 10% off your first purchase. And the great thing about this, too, is that your shopping cart is built in. If you want to sell products, if you want to make your money back and then more, that's included. It does all the heavy lifting for you. I really want to thank Squarespace for their support, for the support of the iMore Show. I want to thank you guys for supporting us through them. Squarespace, a better web starts with your website. That's sort of how I feel about Siri APIs, because the minute people announced Siri, everyone wanted an API. And Guy English wrote that famous dynamic Siri post that I keep referring to because it was hilariously funny. But when I start thinking about it, I tell Siri to add an event to my calendar. There's only one calendar, but if all of a sudden there's calendar 5, there's Fantastical, there has to be some mechanism to handle collision so that 8 or 9 different apps don't think, oh, no, I'll handle that, no, I'll handle that. And there's a lot of stuff that needs to be figured out, I think, before that is a workable solution.
Yeah, I mean, there's always things like that that need to be worked out, and that's something that that Apple's going to have to deal with, so that when we get it, what do we do? Touch a function button and the control button together, and Siri comes up, or and there are none of those collisions. I mean, there's a lot of things to consider, but.
Latif wants to know why so much Google distrust and Google bashing. I can't speak for Jim, but anytime a company becomes sufficiently large, I start to worry about them. And I have concerns about Apple, but I know the direction that Apple lies. Right now, they make their money off selling me shiny objects, and that to me is a relatively safe relationship to be in. Google makes their money off personal data. And I use Gmail. I use a lot of Google services, so I make those deals. But I'm cognizant of how they make their money. Facebook I almost never use because they're similar to Google, but they offer me very little in return compared to Google. So I don't see the advantage. Yeah, I can keep contact with my relatives and stuff, so I'm occasionally there. But it's not a primary thing for me. And I don't know about you, Jim, but I sort of judge it on a case-by-case basis, and just I'm careful about all of them, but some of them I think there's greater risk than others.
I think that I agree with you 100%. I think that Google has a ton of smart people working there, and I don't think that they're all evil. I do think Eric Schmidt is evil. I really, really do. I think he's an evil man, and there's no goodness in his bones, and one day he's just going to self-destruct and bats will fly out of his head or something. I don't trust him. And I think a lot of what we deal with today as as consumers and as people comes back to trust. And I don't trust him at all. And I don't think that their motives have anything more to do than with making more advertising money. I think the people that work at Google are good, smart people. And I think that they're trying to build, some good products. I use Gmail. This is I'm not one of the fanatics people that would never touch these types of products because I think that Google is bad. Gmail is a good product. I use it. Do I know what's going on? Yes, I do. I don't use apps. The Google stuff, and I try. Do I use Google when I search? Yeah, because it's the best search. I mean, it still comes back to wanting the best things, but you're always cognizant of the fact that what, Evil Eric is back there watching me right now. So
yeah,
there is a lot of distrust from me, and I can't help it.
No, and people get really angry about this, but I don't care what bits or atoms are in somebody's pocket. I don't care if somebody likes McDonald's and doesn't like Burger King or like Wendy's. That's a personal thing, and we're just lucky to have choice. We live in a world where you can choose to use or not use Google, and that's absolutely fantastic. I thought it was hilarious. I don't know if you saw it or not, Jim, but Kara Swisher talking about Google in an interview because her wife works at Google. Her wife is a senior vice president of engineering, I think, at Google. And Kara Switch is like, I don't like them. They're bullies. They're horrible. And they go, well, what about your wife? She loves them. She's a hippie. They all love Google. I just wish they'd stop talking about it.
Kara's so funny. Oh, she's great.
Yeah. And we're allowed to live in a world where those things can all be true.
Yeah, and they are, depending on who you ask.
So another question, I lost it because it went by too fast, and I apologize whoever said it, was what do you think about the idea that OS 10 could look more like iOS 7, could be either have more transparency or be flatter, or have Helvetica as the default font? Would any of that offend you to your OS 10 core, Jim?
No, I think what people have to remember is that OS 10 has gone through transitions from the very first OS 10. Go back and look at screenshots of OS 10, the very first version, and I was around for that first version, and it was beautiful. It had, bubbly type aqua interface, and things moved, and it was
lickable.
Exciting. It was so exciting. When we look back at that now, we go, oh, what an abomination of a design that was,
Brushed metal and pinstripes, Jim.
Yeah. So we look at that now and think it was horrible, but we look at the 70s leisure suit now and think that was horrible as well.
Oh, the suits on Mad Men, Jim. The checker suits on Mad Men.
Those are okay. I want one of those.
Me too.
But I think that since OS 10, if you look at every single version, it has gone through some pretty major changes over the years, and iOS clearly went through a more dramatic change all at once. Now, are they going to bring some of that, so-called flat design over to OS 10? I wouldn't be surprised if they did. It's not about making OS 10 more like iOS. It's about design, and it's about making OS 10 as familiar to people that use iOS. And let's face it, there are more iOS users than OS 10 users. But if those people can come over and we can all look at OS 10 and say, I know exactly what to do here. That's what it's all about. It's not about having two operating systems. It's about having operating systems, not one either, but about having operating systems that are familiar and that share data and that allow us as users to get our work done. So is there another design change coming to OS 10? Wouldn't be surprised at all. Is it going to look flatter? Wouldn't be surprised. Is it going to offend me? No. Is it going to be iOS-ified? No. It's going to be a design.
Yeah. And Apple is a company and Johnny Ive is a person. That's one of the things I think, Apple is a bunch of people and a lot of companies aren't. Like you look at a lot of companies and they are run as corporations, organized, they are organized to get as much personality out of their products as possible. Apple has a lot of personality in their products. And one of the things that I like is what Craig Federighi is doing with iOS and OS 10 is not what Scott Forstall would have done. It's very much like it's a coherent product, but he's a little bit geekier. The people have learned how to use OS more, and we can get to the point where stuff like battery shaming, which I think Ryle Nielsen said on Debug, would never have gotten through him as gatekeeper to OS 10 when he was at Apple, but now we have it, and it's an exciting era for me because you still have everyone at the top pushing stuff down, but you all have the engineers pushing stuff up, and you have Craig now and Johnny now in place to sort of work on both at the same time.
Right. I mean, and Craig and Johnny are fantastic people and brilliant at what they do. And, when I look at, just a little while ago, a few months ago, there was either a phone here or one of my old phones that had iOS 6 on it, and I started it up, and I thought, ooh, God, when I started it looked awful. And I remember the first time that I saw iOS 7, I'm not even going to tell you when that was. I thought, this is kind of bland. It's what's going on with this? But now I love it. I look at it and I love it. It's what's needed. It's all that's needed. And when OS 10 first came out, the first version, and the scroll bar, would be like water, and it would move and it would shake, and a lot of that I think was just to prove that it could be done, and that there was some interactivity going on when nobody knew before that interactivity could happen in that area. And that's kind of like how I think of iOS 6. There was shadows, and there was lighting, and there was all the bubbles and all this thing going on. Well, now that's gone, and it's time to get down to some real work and some real design. And do you need all of those fancy bubbles and stuff going on? No, you don't. So make a good design, and let's move on. If that's what happens with OS 10 as well, great.
iOS prior to iOS 7 now reminds me of big 80s hair, where when you were in the 80s, it seems so natural, but when you look back at movies and photos now, you're like, wow, that's some big hair.
Hair bands.
I think one of the other areas that I'm interested to see where Apple goes is iCloud, because they've been working on it for several years now. There's still a couple of pain points. Like, for example, I pay for iCloud. I have the most you can buy. I spend $100 a year for 50 gigabytes, and I have an iPhone, an iPad mini, and an iPad, and I can't back up all of them at the same time. I can't back up all my photos. That is something I'd like to see Apple take care of. Like, maybe if you buy a device, you get as much, not crazy storage, but as much storage as you need just to back up the settings and stuff on those devices, and maybe just to back up your photos and stuff. That's really important to you.
Or let us back up to something else. Let us use Microsoft Azure, if we have a disk or whatever there, or if we have Dropbox, or, let us use whatever we want, or give us the ability to be able to use what we need, and right now we don't. And I've said in the past that iCloud, the services, the sync for iCloud, work great for me, but I'm using them very much as a consumer. I have my contacts, my calendars, photos and PhotoStream and stuff like that, but I'm using them no more than a consumer. There are developers out there who need more, who need different things than what I do. So the sync services are great for me, but yeah, I got a notification. It's been on now for probably a month. When I went away to Ireland, it can't back up anymore. So I don't know what to do now.
Yeah, and we get a lot of readers with the same thing. What they do is just stop backing up, which defeats. Because I think iCloud made backup so easy and it's so important that everyone started doing it. And when you run into that limitation, because I think it's still 5 gigabytes that you get for free, and if you have a 64 gigabyte iPhone or 128 gigabyte iPad, even the smartest of backups is just hard.
Yeah, and that's where I am now. I purchased the extra storage, and I manage my storage. There's very little in there besides what's on my iPhone and a couple of iPads, an Air and a Mini. But yeah, I need my backup. I want my backup done.
What do you think about what's happening with the streaming stuff now, Jim? I know there's all these rumors with Beats, but if we set aside Beats, Apple's done iTunes Radio, but there is such a demand for, you wrote about new Spotify integration in DJ today. There's Spotify is a terrific service. There's a lot of demand for stuff like Netflix, which is also a terrific service. Apple's traditionally was a you buy it, you own it. I love that for some things, but there's other things that I would just like to watch or listen to just to even see if I like them. And I wonder if iTunes Radio could evolve into that. I wonder if iTunes Video and Movies could evolve into that, or if they need to.
Well, Spotify, I tried Spotify out when it first it came over here, and I liked it, but it still really wasn't for me. And I tried it again a couple weeks ago, and I kind of enjoyed it. They kept telling me to listen to Loverboy, though, and that bothered me. I got to tell you, it bothered me. It did. I had to turn it off because it kept coming up and saying, "We want you to listen to Loverboy." No, Spotify. I'm not listening to
Spotify.
Bad Spotify. And what was the other one? One Republic. It wanted me to listen to One Direction or something. I don't know, a boy band. And I thought, what the hell am I listening to that you think I want to listen? I'm listening to Slayer and Ozzy, and you think I need to lighten the mood a bit here? So other than that, yeah, Spotify was pretty good. But iTunes Radio is a great service. It does something different than what a subscription service does. And I think Apple did a good job with iTunes Radio because I customize the radio stations depending on what I'm listening to. And I have like a Cat Stevens iTunes radio station, and I have a Pink Floyd one. So it's not. I don't have an Ozzy one because I own all of Ozzy's music, and I own all of the music that they would probably play around an Ozzy station.
You are the Ozzy station.
So it doesn't make any sense for me to have an iTunes radio station like that. So I have some more singer-songwriter type of iTunes radio stations, and I like them a lot. And I wouldn't want that to go away. But I think that Apple, whether it's with a Beats purchase or not, I think Apple can do a lot around subscriptions. And when Spotify is 10 million, if I'm not mistaken, as of yesterday, 10 million subscribers. I mean, Apple has hundreds of millions of credit cards on file, active. They could blow Spotify out of the water in a day. By doing a subscription service. And again, it comes back to trust. Do I trust Apple to have my credit card, charge me fairly, and not have any issues with the service? Would I try an Apple subscription service? Yes. Would I keep it? I don't know. It depends on what it was like. If it was good, the Spotify stuff, I downloaded a whole bunch of stuff to see how that would work for offline. I tried a bunch of stuff on there. Apple is obviously going to have tie-ins to the iTunes store so that you can buy things. I mean, the biggest thing of this, I think, is what you brought up with videos and movies. Could we do something with that? That's where I think, the subscription music service isn't really where everything is, but the video side is.
Yeah, I would love that. Like Ali Kazmuha talked about this before too, where she rents something, ends up loving it, and wishes she could just press a button like complete my album that would convert it into a purchase. And if you have a streaming thing and you could convert that into a purchase as well, because there are some things that I watch on Netflix that I like so much, I go and buy it so I can put it on my iPad, or I can't watch Netflix on a plane, but I can sure watch iTunes on a plane. Right. And there's all these little areas where I think that Apple could do a lot of interesting stuff.
Yeah, and when I go on to iTunes or my Apple TV and I see a concert, like when Black Sabbath was here in town, I went in that afternoon, and things were were great, hanging out, and I was up on the stage, and it was great. When I was leaving, the guy said, "Hey, did you catch the video that we did, the live video?" And no, I went home. Sure enough, there it was. I had missed it. I bought it right then. It wasn't a rent. Buy.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, there's still absolutely that part of it, and sort of that dovetails into the last thing I want to ask you about, and that is, it's WWDC. The name is on there. It's a developers conference, and Apple's been very good at positioning it as software over the years. You have, over the last few years at least, we got previews of OS 10 and iOS last year. I think the year before as well. Once in a while, they put out new hardware. It's not a consumer, like Apple has never, to my knowledge, launched a new mainstream consumer product there. They've revved the iPhone in previous years, but they didn't launch it at WWDC. They didn't launch the iPad at WWDC. So I don't expect anything like that. But they have shown off new Mac Pros. They have shown off they have announced the new Retina MacBook Pros there. They've bumped other computers. Are you looking for anything on the Mac? I mean, I know the Mac Mini is still waiting for its Haswell bump. The Mac Pros, maybe. They're subject to so much of Intel's roadmap. But is there anything you'd like to see for the Mac, Jim?
I think that Apple's Mac line is very strong. Could they come out and do something? Sure, they could, but it's not a situation, I think, where people are saying, if they don't update the MacBook Air this time, it must be dead. We're not in that type of a situation. So I don't know that this is something that I'm worried about. It's, if something comes out, great, it comes out. I mean, we have to remember that at a developer conference, this is about developers and developer tools and software. So that's what I'm looking for.
If there is a 4K cinema display or a 4K iMac, I will not turn it down, but I also will not be disappointed if I don't see it.
Yeah, I mean, anything at this point that is Mac related, I think is a bonus on top of iOS and OS 10. If I don't see iOS and OS 10, then that might be a bit odd. But yeah, anything on top of that is just gravy.
Yeah, I agree with you. And again, I'm hearing people are really excited about OS 10 this year, which is great to see, especially because some years people are like, Apple's a mobile company, and no, not at all. Apple makes a lot of money off mobile, but they remember the Mac very well.
Yeah.
So, Jim, I really thank you for your time. If people want to find out more about you, if they want to read more of the smart stuff that you write, if they want to see you on Twitter, where can they go?
J Dalrymple on Twitter and at loopinsight.com.
Awesome. And I will see you in San Francisco in a week and a half, sir.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
All right. Thank you so much, Jim.
Thanks, Rene. Anytime.
I want to thank Squarespace for supporting the iMore show. You can go to squarespace.com/iMore, enter offer code iMore, and get 10% off your first purchase. A better web starts with your website.